If you are interested in starting your own podcast, we use Buzzsprout because it is simple and easy to use. Buzzsprout can get your show listed on every major platform while giving you the resources for a great podcast website, audio players that can drop into other websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening to your podcast, and tools to promote your episodes. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and that is why over 100,000 podcasters are already subscribed to Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Following the link in our episode descriptions lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you. So in return, you will receive a $20 Amazon gift card from Buzzsprout while signing up for a paid plan. Most importantly, every subscription through our link is always appreciated and helps support our show so we can continue delivering the quality content that you guys listen to. That being said, back to the show.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Junkies. I'm Andrew.
This is Joe.
And this time around, we're coming back at you with some topic episodes. So we've got a couple here to talk about today. The first one was kind of suggested by my uncle Ted. If you've listened to our last episode, he recorded that with us. He kind of floated the ideas of, what characters could be A-listers with better villains, a good run, or with better writing. There's plenty of characters that we all see as kind of classics, or, we all have our favorite characters that don't get the proper recognition in the books or anywhere else for that matter, or, even in the movies because they don't have really good villains or any good, source material to really pull from, even though we like the characters. And kind of to follow that up, we'll have a little bit at the back end there where we're going to talk about characters that aren't really utilized properly or as much as we would like them to be, in different forms of media, whether that's movies, TV, video games, what have you. Just kind of characters that are kind of slept on. I mean, they may be personal favorites. They might be cult classics. People like every character to some degree for the most part. So it's just finding out the right characters for us that we would like to see on the big screen more, maybe on the TV show. But with that, do you want to start us off? See, we haven't discussed this prior for all of those listening. So, Joe's list is just as surprising to me as, mine will probably be to him. So, let's, start it off, Joe. What do you think? Who could be more of an A-lister with a little bit more juice behind him?
Usually I like to build suspense, but this time I just want to go with the most notable. So I'm going to go with Daredevil as my first overall pick. Most would already consider him like a high level B-list character, but I don't remember it being that way prior to his Netflix show, which was awesome, by the way. But the character is known for his toughness, and because he's limited to being a human, just like Batman, I think the character then becomes a little more relatable as opposed to characters like Thor that are borderline invincible. He's a character that's always gotten a lot of runs in comics, so as there's been many well-written takes on the character that we haven't even reviewed yet, but I actually don't think writing is really the problem with this character. I think having better quality villains more so is the need for this character, because outside of Bullseye, there's not a lot of notable villains that could kind of put him in that A-list category. Kingpin is a lot of fun, but I always have considered him just as much of a Spider-Man villain. And if you look at his origins, they were throwing a lot of villains at him, like Stiltman, Owlman, Purple Man. And if they were just to take their time a little bit and find some characters that could really balance him out and provide a good, unique rogues gallery for him, like Spider-Man, I think Daredevil would be an A-list character.
Now, I like that because what I want to say, is something I kind of blanked out on is to kind of preface this. But he is kind of, he's bigger in stature. Obviously, he's a household name. People love him. But I do agree with you. He doesn't really have memorable villains. Like you said, outside of really Bullseye and, that's pretty much it. Like the Hand, whatever, dude. So basically, he fights ninjas and one gimmicky guy. But he doesn't have a whole rogues gallery, which is kind of how I feel about Iron Man, which is kind of the discussion that got me on this. So, he has some classic runs, not as many as you would imagine for being a character that's been published since the 60s. There's the classic Demon in the Bottle. He was very big in Civil War, when that was popping off. But kind of to a degree, he wasn't an A-lister prior to the films coming out, I would say. I'd say he was bigger, but he wasn't popping like that until Robert Downey Jr. took the role.
I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Do you think he's an A-lister now?
I think he is just because of what the MCU has done to comics. I mean, he's always got a run now. I still don't think that there's many, of substance, or, that are classic, like must reads. But I mean, if you're an Iron Man fan, which my Uncle Ted is, but even he could agree that he doesn't have that many villains, or at least any that are notable. I mean, when you think of Iron Man, do you immediately have someone that's clear cut that you think of when you see him? I really don't. I think I just through conditioning and reading comics that I'm supposed to say it's the Mandarin.
I just think about a box of oranges.
Yeah, exactly. That's the visual. And, him versus the oranges, it's like I don't even see the oranges in the comics that much, like what
Mini oranges.
Exactly. Yeah, he squishes them, dude. Some cuties. He doesn't care. But he's an A-lister now, but you know what I mean? Like they need to really juice his runs. I don't really feel like there's like a go-to story that's like singled in on him. You could say like Armor Wars maybe, but it's like meh, or something like that. But like maybe it's just me and maybe being younger in the game relatively speaking to not being hip to Iron Man. But like I love the character, but I just feel like he has so much more potential than they're capitalizing on. I really feel like they're just riding the wave of the MCU and what that's done for the character, that the comics haven't really ever really followed suit or really lent anything substantial to that.
I agree. I kept him off my list because I felt like what the movies did to the character made him an A-lister.
Agree.
However, he wasn't always, to your point, and B, the levels you could take that character if he actually had a rogues gallery would be insane.
That's the thing. I just
he
wanted
would be
to bring him
closer
up as
to Batman.
Yeah, exactly. I just kind of wanted to bring him up just kind of to, explain to the gang here, the junkies that are listening, that that's kind of what inspired this, because it was just a casual discussion, and it's just like it's something I think about with a lot of Marvel characters, to be honest, but I can't go through and list like a lot of the mainstream characters and just say, oh, they don't have classic runs and they don't have good villains. I have some obviously actually a lot of DC characters on my list, I won't lie, but
let's pivot.
Yeah, let's pivot. You want to go back? What do you got next?
Green Arrow. So
Nice.
Somebody that didn't immediately come to mind, but seems like a no-brainer. He joined the Justice League in issue 4 in Justice League of America issue 4 and played a huge role in the animated series. He's another strong B-list character like Daredevil that could easily be an A-lister if everything falls into place. The first season of Arrow was pretty good and kind of helped him get more exposure. Series fell off, but regardless, I also really like the guy that played him in Smallville. The only thing missing is a good creative team and a cool rogues gallery. All of his best stories are kind of in the Silver Age or even older, where he features Speedy, and there was a little rebirth era when he was partnering with Green Lantern, but I would like to find a villain other than Merlin that could push Green Arrow into the A-list category.
Green Arrow does rule. I mean, he has gotten it, like he's been in TV shows like Smallville, Arrow, stuff like that. But yeah, we haven't seen him in a film. He has not many runs. I don't think he even had a solo series till what was that, like the 80s or something like that? It was like the Mike Grell one is like his first issue one he had, and he's been a character since what, the 40s in More Fun comics. So I mean, he definitely doesn't have a classic run. I mean, maybe like that kind of late period, not even late period, because like comics nowadays he barely even gets a book. Yeah,
he's gonna get a book soon though.
Well, let's hope it sticks this time, because like they always have potential. I mean, honestly, he was one of the first characters I read when I got into comics. It was his New 52 stuff, and it wasn't even that good, but like he's a cool character. He has appeal. I think you just need to give him a good story, here and there. And maybe some villains that aren't just Merlin or
right. You said you had some DC guys on your list?
Yeah, one of them is Lobo. So I mean, if you're a fan of Lobo, I mean, he came out in Omega Men, like what, issue 3? He wasn't the character he is today when he was on that. So that character is dead. He got reinvented in a run by Simon Bisley. My apologies if I don't say your name correctly, if you hear this. But, he's basically known for writing the character for most of like what is known to be Lobo nowadays. Kind of like that 90s anti-hero, willing to kill, over the top, like violent and crass, which I mean, I like Preacher, but it's a different brand of that. But you know what I mean, like kind of like the Punisher, Preacher. It's kind of that whole vibe. Like it's the 90s, dude. You could say what you want and you could do what you want. You could be a real dickhead. But Lobo, I think there's still a market for that though, because he's so similar to characters like that. he only has that run, which I mean is kind of farcical. It's goofy, which I don't think is bad, but there's like no real stories to pull from if you're not a fan of the character. I mean, yeah, space dolphins. He rides a fucking sweet motorcycle through space and this, that, and the other. You know, he's got a chain and he's gonna do some wild shit. He'll fight Superman. He is tough, and I feel like they need to get like a good team behind him because I think people would be interested. And just kind of when I constructed my list, I kind of thought about our back end topic as well. I just feel like this character would lend himself to like even movies and stuff very well. I feel like he's got star power. I mean, if Deadpool can do it, why couldn't Lobo? I personally find him much cooler, and they're not that far off with how they're kind of treated. And I mean, I hear there's stuff in the works with Momoa and Gunn talking about it. I don't know if I want Momoa to do it, even though he kind of looks like it. But you know what I mean? I feel like this character is kind of slept on. I mean, he's kind of a different time at this point, but I don't think that means he doesn't still have that potential that he had.
No, and it was fun kind of seeing him in Justice League, the animated series. So I don't think it's just a piece of that part of time in comics. I think he kind of will stay relevant for
He's
later
the main man.
readers. Yeah, for sure. But speaking of assassins or of that nature, you mentioned him when talking about Lobo. Punisher was on my list. I don't know if you consider Punisher a B or a C lister, but he may forever stay there because he's a lot more violent of a character. But I think it's unfair because Deadpool may be an A-lister and gets away with it because the character is way less serious. But I think some mature writing on the Punisher could make this character way more interesting than some current A-list characters, which is crazy because he has yet to have any overly remarkable runs in comics, despite how interesting he is. Some of that may be due to him not having any villains, but that's kind of what you run into when you're writing an anti-hero. So I guess an introduction to some more interesting characters in his story would go a long way, because I think he has the potential to transcend Deadpool in the realm of assassins, and he's also been robbed of good writing. So I think it starts with good villains and or characters surrounding him and some good writing.
Yeah, I'm with you actually. I just think that with he's like his own thing. So I think that he basically needs more of a supporting character cast that needs to be fleshed out. Because if the Punisher's the Punisher, he's either going to have to stop using guns in order to keep villains around, or he's just going to mow them down, dude. And there's nothing you can do. So he's kind of got a little bit of an enigma going on. He can't have a good villain, but, it's just eternally him mowing down his enemies. So I mean,
yeah,
it's just
maybe
tough.
it starts with a supporting cast for him.
It's got to be something. I mean, maybe he fights a guy who's immortal. I don't know. Like an immortal gangster. I don't like what else is he going to fight, I guess.
Solomon Grundy.
There you go. Just in the sewer every other weekend, picking a fight with a.
Yeah, Marvel needs to find their own.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. Plus, he doesn't have like a real sense of humor because he's such a tragic character. But I do agree with you. There's more juice left to be in the character. I just don't know how we tap it, But I'm with you. That's a good choice. The next couple that I have are a little bit more fun, in my opinion. Here's a good one. It's Static Shock. So I think
all the way to the A-list.
He could be. Okay, so what reason couldn't he? He already has nostalgia amongst people in and around our age. We all remember the WB animated series. Classic. He has no real runs to speak of. So, I mean, there's plenty of potential to really, flesh out the character. I mean, most of what I feel people really truly know is what came from the animated show. It's not like he has a ongoing series at any point. If they do, it's usually like a 4-issue mini series, and then that gets chucked in the back issue bin. And, I just think it's cool. I mean, especially, with the way comics are nowadays, they're obviously trying to diversify, the characters, the content. They're trying to go towards a younger crowd. I don't see any reason why Static Shock couldn't take that place. I mean, I feel like the sky's the limit. It's just a matter of if and how they want to go about it, to be honest. I feel like there's,
Wouldn't it be crazy if they could kind of replicate everything they did in the early 2000s with all those animated shows like Batman Beyond, Static Shock, Justice League, and had that same kind of impact on a live action screen?
Yeah, that would be great. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I mean, I just feel like it's a underdeveloped property. I'm not saying they should go do whatever to it, but I mean, if you're looking for someone to elevate that, it wouldn't even take all of the effort in the world, I don't feel to, he's an interesting enough character. I mean, I remember fondly watching that show. I mean, if they could just translate that and even give him a comic run for people to latch onto, I feel like, it's just kind of like a blank slate character that already has like nostalgia on his side. I feel like, there's a lot of potential you can get out of him.
I think part of that too is because it was so restricted to Milestone. And if you can kind of transition that momentum into just DC in general, I think the character would get a lot more exposure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's just a matter of, getting the proper, sign off to do so, I guess that's necessary. And then, just really giving him a good push. I mean, there's plenty of characters at DC that could become big, but I feel like he's just kind of got like a star power, especially with, the state of comics today. I don't see why he couldn't become like one of the bigger characters if they gave him a real push. But yeah, who do you got next?
You said you had some fun ones. I'm going to go with a little less fun of a submission. I think Namor is a B-list character that has the chance to move to the A-list. Many would argue that Aquaman is an A-list character for DC, so I don't know why Namor couldn't be an A-list character for Marvel. He came out before Aquaman and is a cornerstone of Marvel in general, so I don't know why he doesn't get enough attention. Maybe it's because he's got more of a serious tone, but he could be a way more interesting version of Aquaman, and I think deserves more media attention if the character could get a good creative team to take on the character. I don't think he needs more villains necessarily. I would like to see him team up more with kind of going back to that Punisher thing with like anti-heroes. Like for him it would be more about the supporting cast. Like I always like when he teams up with Captain America and the Human Torch, or he's fighting overpowered characters kind of like Doctor Doom or Incredible Hulk. So that seems to be his bread and butter, and if you can kind of get a good creative team outside of the original volume, I think the character has a lot of potential.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think he would be sweet. I mean, he's starting to get his push now. He's going to be as close to an A-lister as he's going to get over the next few years. So, I mean, let's see. I mean, they're going to give him more miniseries and runs, and I'm sure if they ever figure out with Universal about movies that he'll be getting, more exposure there. So we can hope for him.
Now, we both watched Black Panther too. Did you like the take on the character?
Parts of it. I feel like the actor did fine for what they kind of wanted. I think he was good. I mean, I don't think that this was like the Namor that like a purist comic fan wanted, but I mean, I thought he was fine. He said Imperious Rex, he was whooping ass. And he was ruthless while also, kind of being diplomatic in a way. So it was cool. I liked certain aspects of the character. I wouldn't say he was perfect, but it wasn't bad. What do you think?
That's a pretty good sum up of the character, I would say. I feel the same as you. There were parts that kind of surprised me. I wasn't expecting much, and I think they did a good job with the tone of the character for the most part. Now, they had a good actor that played him. I wasn't sure that he was the right guy for the part, or there was a few decisions I wasn't super fond of, but I would say that it was better than I thought it would be. And there were parts that I actually did enjoy. Like you said, he was pretty ruthless and diplomatic, and was one of the more interesting parts of that movie, or one of the better parts of the movie.
The interesting part of that movie.
Yeah. What about you? Who's another character on your list?
Okay, so I've got like a bunch here, and I see that we kind of have philosophical differences on what we mean by could be an A-lister, because obviously I went to the doldrums of going to like Static Shock, which is a very reserved and minimal property at this point. But I'll go with one who's a little bit closer to the level of guys you've been talking about, and I'll go with Martian Manhunter. Like, obviously, we all remember him from the Justice League animated show. He's the GOAT. John Jones, he rules. But when it comes to comics, I mean, does anything come to mind? You hear that silence? It's deafening because you can't think of anything. So, I mean, he came out in Detective Comics back in like the end of the Golden Age, basically. And, he's a backup feature in that. Then he goes to House of Mystery, and kind of has his own solo series. nothing really fruitful came of that. And when you think on who wrote him or what any runs that he might have, which his own self-titled series are far and few between, I mean, he's a fantastic supporting character when they write him as such. But I still think he has enough interesting traits to carry his own book should a good writing team or a good creative team get on it. Once again, nostalgia on their side. I mean, it's kind of a blank slate because you can go with him going undercover as a human, doing stuff like that. He could fight people in space, he could save people on Earth. He has basically every skill and power set of Superman plus telepathy. He's not that far off. He's one of the bigger powerhouses at DC. It wouldn't be that crazy to think that they could make the character work, because even in the Justice League books, like once the New 52 kind of put the kibosh on everything cool, they kind of sent him packing, dude. And it wasn't until like that Snyder run, like shoot, that's years ago at this point, that they brought him back as like even a JLA member. So I mean, for some reason he's not really being properly utilized. He's been in live action for a cameo in the Snyder Cut, and he's otherwise just been in some animated properties. I mean, really shining in the Justice League stuff, but it's Martian Manhunter. I feel like everyone would be lining up to read a story about him if they actually had like a competent squad writing him.
100% agree. I think that's a good shout out. He actually wasn't on my list, but he definitely deserves to be on the list. I have one more meaningful submission before I go to my honorable mentions. I'm going to do a combined one. I'm going to say Swamp Thing and Animal Man.
Oh, nice.
So for Swamp Thing, I would say Swamp Thing borders between a C and a B-list character currently, but I wouldn't be surprised if people consider him an A-list character one day. Man-Thing came out first, and Swamp Thing is still cooler. Alan Moore took this character to new heights using the Swamp Thing to explore more mature themes, especially for comic books. And this character is now even heavily associated with the Justice League Dark, if not the coolest character on Justice League Dark, which I think is a big part of the secret sauce that might propel him to the A-list. That being said, I can tell they are trying to push the character because he's gotten quite a few runs lately too, but he was also featured in the Injustice League game too. So more so than proper writing and villains, I think he's already had good writing. I think he just needs more movie exposure. And then Animal Man, this one's more of a flyer because the character seems a little bit more niche, but I think the character has a lot of potential to be more than just a popular alternative to like Beast Boy. Realistically, I would say he's a C-list character at the moment and could definitely become a B-lister, maybe better, but evidenced by the way Grant Morrison wrote the character, there's a lot of nuances to Animal Man, and it shocks me that he hasn't been featured in anything movie related and not much TV related as well. So he's had a big role in comics, even making an appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths. If someone wanted to make a mature movie using the character, I bet Animal Man would jump up on many lists, regardless of throwing villains at it, because character's got a lot of room for potential.
Yeah, I'm with
Both
you.
of
And
them.
you kind of segued into our other topic as we're getting towards the end of our show here. He underutilized the media. He was one of the number one people I had up there, was Animal Man. I mean, he's never seen in live action or animated. He's basically relegated strictly to the pages and barely that. Could be super cool if given the chance. And like you mentioned, he's similar to Beast Boy in a way, but he's cooler and he's more mature. I mean, he has a family and kids. He's not basically a teenage pervert. So I think you could do a lot more with him. I think it'd be a lot cooler. And he doesn't turn into like a green chicken all the time and, be a dickhead. So I think he deserves to be seen more. Basically in the pages too. He hasn't gotten a run since the New 52. And before that, it was like the classic stuff. But even though like it's all considered like good, they just don't greenlight anything for him. One of the other media ones I had who's kind of similar to Swamp Thing and Animal Man was Zatanna. So she kind of also doubles in with the kind of like the A-list thing. She's more of like a C-list on the verge of B, I would say. I mean, she's popular, but like, how is she really used? Until they really started making Justice League Dark a thing, it was also just kind of a niche almost. Like she'd get a solo series that was carried by Adam Hughes covers and stuff like that for collectors. But it's like when you think of Zatanna, you're not really thinking of any specific classic tale. But that kind of whole squad of like the Justice League Dark and kind of some of those earlier like Showcase and Strange Adventures characters, since we're kind of moving past a little bit the A-listers, but I guess this also counts as a media deserver, was Adam Strange. He was kind of like a honorable mention. If DC ever chose to really dedicate themselves at least a little bit to like the sci-fi route rather than just pure superhero and stuff like that, I feel like he could easily be very interesting, especially if it were to be a movie or something of that nature. I feel like that would be sick. I mean, there's plenty of sci-fi movies coming out. Marvel craps out a Star Wars every year, and there's Dune and stuff like that. There's no reason why they couldn't do like a grounded take on Adam Strange, just getting hit with the beams, getting taken to Ran, maybe even Hawkman and Thanagar are involved. Like, there's a lot of cool potential with a character like that, because it's just sci-fi. You can make it goofy. I mean, I don't even care, but like you could even do like a Star Trek type deal with it. It could just be whatever you want it to be. And there's so many good characters that they just don't use like that.
Great shout out. Yeah, I wish it would have worked out with HBO, and hopefully they kind of circle back to it and make it a thing, because it's an iconic character that's been out for a very long time, and there's a lot of potential for stories, and especially with that space odysseys genre. But I guess my last shout out before we close our episode is to a lot of those X-Men characters, including but not limited to Cyclops, Kitty Pryde, and Gambit. I could see many of those characters reaching heights similar to, but maybe not as high as Wolverine. There were talks about Channing Tatum playing Gambit, which would have been huge for the character, but that obviously never came into fruition. Cyclops is the obviously leader of the X-Men, so he doesn't seem to get enough attention outside of the X-Men group. I think probably because he's more of a Boy Scout type character, but I don't think he's limited to that and deserves to be utilized more. And Kitty Pryde was also a late addition to the X-Men and is unique in the way that we kind of seen her develop and grow up over the years. So I think she makes for kind of a more fun and relatable character that could get more attention in comics, media, etc. But last shout out would be Ant-Man. If his powers weren't so nerdy, I think he would be an A-list or at least of A-list status with a proper rogues gallery. He's an original Avenger and doesn't get the credit he deserves, so I thought it was important that he gets mentioned considering today's topics.
Nice one. And just to put a bow on it, I have one that I know you're going to co-sign, so I'm just going to say it. We don't even got to talk much about it. Kamandi. Whether it's writing, whether it's a movie, which could be sick, or, even a TV show or animated series probably would be better than a live action TV show. But Kamandi, I mean, used basically never. DC basically wants to use them for like writing workshops, or if they want to get a bunch of people on a anthology book that they need to fill pages for, they'll let someone do it. But no one ever does it great, and I feel like it would be awesome if they could just flesh out the character. I mean, respect to Kirby. I mean, it's probably not going to top anything he did, but I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't at least give it a try. But with that, I mean, that's our episode, guys. You know where to find us on social media, but in case you're new here and you don't, we're on Instagram and Facebook. Hit us up. It's at CBJ Pod on Instagram, CBJ Podcast. Comic Book Junkies, just search us that way. We're also on YouTube. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell whoever you want. Give us 5 stars if you can, if you want to. Helps with the algorithm. Don't know how it works, but apparently feeding it 5 stars is good for us, and it's good for any other podcast you enjoy. And yeah, I mean, we appreciate you guys for listening. I can't believe we've already, recorded this many episodes, but we couldn't do it without you. We enjoy doing it, and we're going to keep doing it. As for next time...
Speaking of which, you and I haven't talked about it yet, but I was looking at the calendar, and I think that would put our next episode around right before the end of the year. If it happens to be our end of the year episode, we'll probably do some kind of reflection episode like we do every year. Talk about things that we're grateful for, talk about our favorite episodes, etc. This is not the first time that we've done one of these kind of reviews. I don't know if this is one of the fan favorites, but it's important to us to kind of reflect on that stuff anyways. So I think that's what we'll be doing up next episode, and excited to record another one.
Yeah, you heard
Cheers.
the man. 2022 roundup. Here it comes. Get ready. But with that, we'll catch you next time.
Salute.
Salute.